This is the Pigs and Fergs Wrestling Podcast. Now, who are Pigs and Fergs? Well, my name's Fergs.
I'm Pigs.
And we talk about wrestling nonsense. Basically, it's AEW, WWE, TNA, every kind of professional wrestling really in between. Just general wrestling nonsense, as we've kind of coined it, mixed with action figure and wrestling video game nostalgia. Subscribe if you like this sort of thing. But in this video, we're just kind of going to introduce ourselves really and what this podcast is about and why we started it. So I think there's no better way to start than Pigs. Do you want to kind of take the floor? Who are you and why did you want to do this podcast? Because it's your idea.
Oh yeah, it is my idea. My idea was to give an alternative to your wrestling podcast, because most wrestling podcasts, even though they are a fan of wrestling, I'm not digging at anyone, even though they are a fan of wrestling, they don't really go into the insides of like the action figure community or video game community. And I thought, who better than, let's just admit, a legend of stop motion himself, and Mr. NLW, if that's fine to say, because I don't know if he wants it to be a different identity, but Mr. NLW is a legend in the stop motion industry, and I thought it would be only right to do it with him, so you get to know the person behind him, Fergal.
That's me. I'm Fergal, and you'll know me as NLW, of course you will, because you would have heard it through NLW. But this is where I can be a little bit more goofy, a little bit more myself. Not to say that I'm putting.
And swear.
Yeah, exactly. But not
Go
to
on, swear there now. Swear.
I'm not swearing. No, I can't. I've still got to keep advertisers happy, in case this thing becomes big, And we're being ambitious. We've already got 12 episodes planned at this point.
You've 12 episodes planned.
Yeah, so we're already like all in on this. We are really excited to just talk about all kinds of wrestling, really. And I know you've picked out shows that you want to do, and I've picked out shows I want to do. But yeah, in terms of who we are, we're just wrestling fans at the end of the day, aren't we?
We are wrestling fans, and by the way, when we say all in, we're not reviewing all in the pay-per-view. We're just all in on this. We're going double or nothing on this.
And I would like to review Double or Nothing, but that's a future episode, I'm sure. So, how will this podcast?
50.
Yeah, hey, how will this podcast kind of be formatted, really? Well, what we'll do each week or month or however often we do this, we'll pick a show to review. We'll review it, but not only will we review the show, we'll also talk about what we were doing at the time, because I've been a wrestling fan for like nearly 20 years, since 2006, and you
16 years.
Yeah, you've been a wrestling fan since
2013, so 9 years.
So
10 years. 10 years come January.
So a long time. So we both can kind of call back to memories of what we were doing at the time, and a lot of the episodes we've picked for this first 12 are kind of related to our wrestling fandom and our lives, really, aren't they?
Yeah, it's more of excluding the TNA episodes that you'll see pop up on your feed, there's a lot of shows that resemble the year we were, what time frame we were born around, what was our first show that got us into it, and maybe what's your favourite show, our favourite show. Obviously, we'll have two different shows, but you get what we mean.
Yeah, just to provide some context really as to where we are in our wrestling fandom and like why we like certain wrestlers, like Monty Brown, for instance, who is the main man on our channel banner, Billy Gunn, Christian, those kind of guys, why we kind of connect to these characters. And I think they kind of shaped us, and it's also interesting, as you listen in to our ramblings, you too can kind of share your nostalgia for wrestling with us, like who your favourites are. So, right off the bat, I think it's a good introduction to say who our favourite wrestlers are and what our favourite kind of moments from wrestling are and what our kind of ethos about wrestling is. Do you want to go first?
Are we doing a top 5 or a top 10?
We'll go top 5 wrestlers. We'll narrow it down.
Number 1 for me, he is our channel banner. It's Mr. CC. Everyone throw your hands up in the air and do the Christian Cage pose. It's Mr. Christian Cage. Number 2 for me, it always differs, but it's usually CM Punk, the wrestler, not the human being, allegedly. Number 3 will be Monty Brown, of course. Number 4 is Test, and number 5 is Sean O'Hare, because Sean O'Hare is brilliant, and I will fight anyone who disagrees.
Sean O'Hare is
Not
the
literally.
best. Absolutely.
Not literally. I should say that I'm not going to get involved in any fights. I'll just blatantly delete your comment and say that you wrote something hateful. That's it.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do on this podcast. We're going to control the narrative, not in an EC3 kind of way, but in a we're going to silence you if you disagree with us when we say that Sean O'Hare is the greatest. And unironically, he's very good. But my top 5, I would say it's kind of a mainstream top 5, not necessarily. I would say it's always a mix of these guys. Like, I can't really rank them. So we've got Jeff Hardy, just because he was the first person that I kind of gravitated towards when I was a kid. Just a high-flying, reckless dude who jumps off ladders. What's not to like? In a similar vein, Rey Mysterio as well. I've always thought of... I saw a lot of myself in him because he was an underdog and he was a small dude. And, I was a guy at school who was quite skinny. Still am, but still. That underdog mentality in Rey Mysterio is something that I've always connected with. CM Punk as well. The wrestler, not necessarily the human being. Allegedly, is
allegedly.
Exactly. Regardless of what.
Watch your children.
Yeah, regardless of whatever people say about CM Punk, as a performer, he's fantastic, and I will always think he's a great professional wrestler at the end of the day. Daniel Bryan Danielson, aka, I just thought his journey from being, again, like the underdogs, I quite like him from rising up in WWE from the independent ranks and then winning the big one at WrestleMania was never meant to. And number 5, probably Pac. I love me the bastard. He is someone who, when he left WWE, I was gutted. And then I found out he was coming to do his first show in the UK for an independent. I think, I could be wrong, but he faced Will Ospreay. And then I was already a fan of him. But after that, I was just like, oh, my mind's blown. This guy, he's so crisp. He might not be on other people's top 5s, but he is on mine. I think his character work as well, ever since he's joined AEW, has been phenomenal. So, yeah, that is my kind of top 5 wrestlers. And I don't really have a specific style of wrestling I like or dislike, really. So that's why I think this podcast is a great avenue for us, because I don't know about you, but I'm not really tied down to one specific style of wrestling. I like all different flavours. What about you?
I like all different flavours, except for people who quite literally kill themselves in the ring. Like, the hardcore kind of wrestling is not for me. ECW, alright, but Jesus, some GCW guys really, no, not for me.
Yeah, so you're the squeamish one of the two of us then, I gather. Because I can watch me some GCW, and yeah, I don't really find any. I'm sure we'll have to do a GCW show. I'll have to put you through it, force you.
Oh no! I'll force you through WCW 2000 so you can see Mike Awesome become the fat chick Thriller.
It's a risk. I'm willing to take, and we'll go through all sorts of wrestling nonsense. That's the main theme of this PNF Pigs and Fergs wrestling podcast, is wrestling nonsense, because we don't take wrestling too seriously. Hence why the first episode is going to be TNA Impact, which features a very funny running storyline of AJ Styles trying to decide who he wants to side with. But that's just a preview for episode 1. But yeah, you like your comedy and wrestling, do you, Piggy?
I like my comedy and wrestling, but sometimes comedy and wrestling is very forced. It's like, just laugh at the show, laugh at it, he's being funny. And you're like, no, comedy and wrestling has to be natural. It can't just be laugh because I said laugh.
Yeah,
it has to be natural.
Not a fan of Jack Swagger's hat?
No. If it was like a comedic thing, yes, it would be funny, but it's more laugh. I said laugh. And Tony's allegedly doing coke backstage, just laughing his head off.
I think that's one of the times you don't have to say allegedly. It feels like it's off the wall. And I do want to review some AEW. I love me some AEW. And we don't have biases really, do we? And I think that's why this is going to be a fun watch through, is because, well, we've got favourites, but I wouldn't say we're close-minded, except GCW said, but I'm not personally. For the most part, we are very much open to all different kinds of wrestling, and is there anything weird or about wrestling that you might want to cover in the future?
No, one thing I want to definitely put myself through. I know we joked about it saying we won't review it, but I definitely would love to put myself through some horrible wrestling, like the greatest wrestling show ever, the Legends of Wrestling, held in 1999.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I know loads of people have done it, but I feel like it's almost like a wrestling podcast rite of passage, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the greatest wrestling show ever.
Exactly. I mean, I'm sure we'll get to it at some point. And there's loads of stuff we want to do moving forward. Like, we both have such a... I don't know. We've been wanting, both of us, to do this sort of thing for a long time. It's just now the stars have aligned, haven't they?
The stars have certainly aligned. This is all thankful to, I want to say, this is all thankful to Spam Wrestling, who was the first ever guest on, we'll just say, the NLW Characters podcast. And now, thanks to Spam, it has quite literally spammed and out of control. And there's two of us now starting our own podcast.
Hey, there you go. Again, it kind of... because me and Spam, we're both Ruthless Aggression guys, so it's it definitely spurred on like my nostalgia kick, really wanting to talk about old wrestling more, because I've done it a little bit on my NLW podcast, but I wanted to have this as a separate avenue, and I think we've both got different perspectives on things, and yeah, like I said though at the start, it is something new, so bear with us. We're not going to be rocking on all cylinders to start off with. It will be a gradual process, but I am very much looking forward to us as a duo here in the wrestling podcast space, because God knows there isn't enough wrestling podcasts these days, eh?
Hey, yeah, you said that correctly. There's not a lot to have good comedic timing.
Hey, there you go. And we'll try and force it at the start, but by the time episode 10 comes along, it'll be fine, won't it? We'll be the next best comedy duo next to trying to think of a funny wrestling duo that I could put in there.
Kurt Angle and Steve Austin.
We'll be like, we'll be like Kurt Angle and Steve Austin by the time this podcast is fully underway. So, yeah, is there anything else you want to say, Piggy?
There's not much I want to say. You can check out my Instagram at p.wiggy182. It's after Blink182 if you couldn't tell. You can check out NLW stuff at NLW Instagram. And by episode 10, I will get Fergal to swear. I will promise you that.
I'm a clean-cut kind of guy, but we'll have to wait and see. I'm sure something will irritate me, but, our first episode's TNA Impact, so what could possibly go wrong with that?
Nothing goes wrong. We are just two happy guys, not being biased at all. Please, AEW, please pay us, please.
Yeah,
please
pay us. I'll shill anyone for money, but, yeah. So, that's our little introduction. Be sure to check out our first episode coming real soon, TNA Impact, January 3rd, 2008. Fantastic episode, and we'll hope to see you there. From myself and Piggy, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoy the Pigs and Fergs Wrestling Podcast.